All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Demand Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Bland, co-founder of Omni Lab, and today I'm joined by Christian Dion, good friend of mine. We actually worked a while together as well, who's the marketing director at Broadsign. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Cool. So want to get into a couple of different things here. You and I have obviously talked a whole bunch before on some stuff here related to billboard ads, but I think a lot of people haven't used them potentially and don't know anything about them, how they work, et cetera. So I think the big thing that we wanted to do is like just kind of break that down a little bit. But maybe before we even do that, obviously, you guys have a couple different products that you guys offer between now Broadsign Ads, to get that right, and also Broadsign, just the overall company. But it might be good just for like a really quick overview, nothing too crazy in the details of what Broadsign offers, maybe speaking to the Broadsign Ads portion of it or so, and then kind of Broadsign as a whole.
Okay, that's great. The way I like to explain it to friends who ask me, what does Broadsign do? I say to them, you know what? You've seen those ads on digital billboards on roadside or restaurants and bars or stadiums or airport or transit. All those digital boards are run with a software, and that software for 75% of the top media owners in the world is the Broadsign platform. So we are really the platform that powers out of home. And out of that suite of product, we also have, of course, product that help them manage their business and grow and optimize their revenue and profit. And we have a suite of solution for the buy side, so for buyers, media buyers. And one of them is our own DSP, our own demand side platform, or to make it more easy to understand, like more an ad buying platform for digital out of home.
Right. So I could go in like an agency or even just a marketing team could go into the platform and say, hey, I want to see if I can find a few billboards in this specific city. And then I want to buy that inventory for X period of time with X budget and start running some creatives, right? Be easy as that.
That's exactly it. It. And we're going to talk more about it, I'm sure, during our call today. But what really differentiate Broadsign Ads from other DSP in the market for omnichannel, for example, the larger one, which we do business with, by the way, as well, is that Broadsign Ads is super streamlined. The workflow is very similar to what you would see when you run your Facebook ads, for example.
Yep.
So it's very you can see the similarities, and we make it easy for you to buy your digital out of home across multiple publishers, right? So you don't have to send faxes and call 25 people to run a campaign, and you can layer some data to it, and we can talk about that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, I mean, probably most people know what billboard ads are, right? They're the things that when you drive down the road, you see big billboards on the highway usually, right? But there are a whole bunch of other assets too, right? It's not just clearly billboard ads on the side of the road. There's also ones by bus stops and all sorts of other types of locations. And I guess curious to like get your thoughts, like what are some of those other assets that people should be maybe thinking about other than like the typical like big billboard, like down the big highway type of thing?
Yeah, for sure. There are, I like to look at it like place-based and outdoor. So your typical outdoor will be the one you just referred to, the billboards, the one that most people know from also with the traditional billboards, like the static one. But the place-based one are very interesting because you now can integrate your marketing message in a specific context. So if you want to be speaking with people in restaurants and bars, that could be interesting for messages where you need a little bit more of a longer dwell time. You want to communicate something a little bit more complex. You want some type of interaction where there's a QR code integrated, where you can download something or visit a website. It makes the execution a bit more deep, as opposed to your typical billboard on the highway, where you probably have less than 2 seconds to grab the
Right.
attention, right?
Hopefully you're not looking at it too much longer than that. Otherwise you could
Yeah, you don't
get
want
yourself
nothing
into
more.
some problems.
Exactly.
Well, there was something, I think Jason was telling me about this, is they did some campaign when he was back in automotive where they put QR codes on those big highways. And then I think there's this whole legal thing where I don't even know if it's legal now. It seems like it probably shouldn't be, but they put a big QR code in case people were going by. And then hopefully like the passenger, not the driver, was getting out their phone to kind of take a little picture of it to see if they could get into the website or wherever they wanted the traffic to go. But yeah, the use case for sure, like a bus stop's probably a much better one
Yes,
for the
sure.
QR codes. Yeah.
Yeah, the bus stop, your restaurant. So there's multiple venue types. Digital screens now being so affordable, they are being integrated into multiple different environments. The one that we see picking up right now, there's new emerging verticals in the or venue types in our industry, are EV charger, for example. There's multiple screens in those chargers popping up everywhere. And that's becoming super interesting for a CPG brand, for example, because those chargers are normally in shopping malls or at proximity to shopping centers and
Right.
retail points. So you can start establishing some correlation between sales and the exposure to the ad face. So we also see more and more screens appearing in grocery channels, for example. So you think of Kroger, for example, in US, they or Walgreens, for example, they all have their retail media network, the pure digital one, but they also try to extend in other channels as well. And audio is also booming in that context. But digital out of home or out of home itself, those screens are being integrated at multiple places in the retail environment, making it super interesting for you as a brand to follow along the path to the journey to purchase, the purchase path to communicate your message and create some variation on the path.
Exactly. I wanted to move. You kind of prompted me into something a second ago when you were talking about just getting me thinking about use cases and whatnot. But I was talking with a client the other day, and they were talking about this use case of, hey, maybe we could do this ABM strategy where they've got, for example, a very enterprise motion. They're going after the top 3,000 accounts. And now, granted, I actually want to talk about this in a second in terms of people like not going into the office quite as much. But let's say that Dell, that's headquartered in Austin, Texas. There's a lot of people that probably work at Dell, but maybe even if they don't go to the office, it's not a big deal. And they were talking about a campaign where maybe we could target Dell with specific billboard ads in and around the Austin area, as an example. And that being kind of a primary use case and running that campaign for X period of time. And at the same time, what they would do is they would, of course, be running digital on Facebook, LinkedIn, and other channels. So they'd be kind of just getting all over the place, just completely immersing the people there. Now, obviously, there's people at Dell that work all over the country and world. So clearly, you're not going to get everyone, but they know that there's a lot of the people that they're trying to go after in Austin, Texas. So I was curious, like, I don't know, like, are those some of the common use cases that you guys come across when you guys are talking with either agencies or other marketing teams, et cetera, in terms of like doing like very niche, like ABM strategies like that? Or are there some other ones that are maybe more interesting, or is that a bad idea? Maybe
It's
even
a great idea, and honestly, it's a wide space. I think this is where you can differentiate yourself right now as a enterprise, let's say, type of sell or ABM for B2B, for example. There is room to innovate there. We don't see a lot of brands coming forward because the execution of it is too requires some kind of work, but when it's done, it moves the needle, right? So I'll give you an example. What I would do for ABM, let's say you are wanting to get the attention of Dell, because I think that's your use case here.
Sure. Yep.
Dell
Exactly.
and 2,000 other customers, but let's say you pick your top 20 that your sales team is going after in Q3, and you want to create grab some attention, because I like to bring it back to attention. We are living in a world where attention is everything. So we can definitely find a way to create some sort of surround sound to your ABM. So you get those messages specific to each of your customer, customized to them. You can call them by, hey, we're Dell, you are on our target list.
Yeah, you could literally call out their name.
Exactly.
That's a good idea. Yeah, just like, hey, Dell.
Yeah, hey Dell.
Yeah.
We're actually looking forward to talk to you. Here's my phone number. Something
Yep.
creative. You can work on the creative,
Yep.
but there's something to be done there, and definitely surround the. You can try to go a bit even further if it's possible to find where do live the execs that you want to reach out to, which may be a bit more tricky to find their home address, but to find their path to the office. But I would even combine this with direct mail. I mean, hey, we've been trying to reach out to you through email, through traditional mail, and billboard. Is there a way, is there a better way for us to smoke signal, maybe, to reach out to you at some point? But it's what's interesting too is you can start establishing some retargeting pool. So anyone that are exposed or at proximity, you can create. Of course, you'll be totally out of the Dell employees at that point. But for other types of campaign, we can create a retargeting pool. Anyone being any mobile device IDs exposed or at proximity to those boards, we can retarget them on other channels afterwards, on LinkedIn or through display or even on social, on Facebook and Instagram.
Seems like that use case, that'd be a better use case if you have a really wide open TAM, like there was a company I was talking to that, their TAM essentially is almost anyone, but they're of course focusing on a certain segment right now, but they offer people the ability to essentially the lower income side of the US, or really the world in this case, but he's going after the US right now. What they can do is his company will actually front money when they're in a situation where they maybe need to pay their rent or they need to pay, a car bill or something like that. But the company that they work for doesn't pay on a daily basis. They pay on a monthly basis, maybe, right? So that means that they need to wait that whole month to get that cash. So what they can do is literally just get that cash early from that company and start working. But the point is anyway, it's more related to the size of their market is just so big. So, well, cool. Yeah, kind of moving on. So one thing I was curious about, you and I chatted about this, I think before, but clearly, we've got a lot of different things going on, looming recession, all sorts of things. I don't want to go into that too much, but certainly people since COVID and even now and probably into the future are probably not going to be going into work nearly as much as they were before. So there's this whole, people are commuting less on highways. But I think I've got a perspective on this, maybe just to give my opinion, then I'd love to just maybe go back and forth with you on it, where, I think even though that's true and people aren't commuting as much and going to some specific office location, it doesn't mean they're just not commuting. It means they're still going to places, they're going to supermarket, they're going to see friends, they're going to see family, etc. And there's all these other movements. It's maybe not to the consistency that it was once before, where it's like at the morning, I go from my house to this location every single day, right? Now it's maybe a little more sporadic in terms of where people are going around there. But I'm just curious, I don't know, have you guys been getting that, question from people that are maybe thinking about Billboards ads and saying, really everyone's just kind of on their social media devices. They're not going to work anymore. Do you still have the opinion that I do or a different one, or what are you guys hearing there?
I think it was more common before when the pandemic was really at its peak. Now it's not much of an objection. I would say simply because you look at data, right? You look at mobility index provided by Apple or Google, where they pull from their the mobile devices. People are out and about more than ever, actually. That's interesting because you would think, okay,
that is interesting.
There's an hybrid work environment going on, of course, work and life environment as well. But people are more out and about doing other stuff than commuting, which provides actually more opportunity for out of home, because you look at your path in a day or your typical point A to point B might not be as straightforward. You might change your habits on a daily basis. I might be going during my lunchtime to a grocery store or to the restaurant, meeting a friend, or going for a bike ride, going at the park to walk my dog, or things like that, right? So, and one other thing we need to remember is this last 2 years, as with the increase of digital content and the time we spend in front of our computers and screens, has been taking a toll on many people. And there's media fatigue going on, whether we want to ignore it or not. There is media fatigue. And when people are going out, I think they're going out with a different mindset. And OAAA actually came up with some interesting study with one of their partner, where they look and ask, surveyed people, are you more receptive to out-of-home message? And a majority of them, there's been an increase. You look at numbers pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, it's a massive increase. So I think the context is different, and the opportunities for really creating an interesting storytelling around leveraging out of home is there more than ever.
Well, and I think people, I mean, to your point, and people are tired of being inside, even still to this day. And clearly, I think it's eased up a lot, at least in the U.S. here. I don't know how it's fared as much in Canada, but more and more people have been going out, especially the summer has been one of the busiest travel seasons ever. So people are traveling like crazy because everyone is just sick of it. And so, and frankly, a lot of people have already gotten COVID. And so I think now that they feel like they've gotten it, it's like, okay, well, I've had it at least. And now I'm kind of more comfortable, but yeah, I agree. That's a really good point that you mentioned. So yeah, people are moving more, and I didn't know that about that mobility index. That's interesting to think about. Well, let's use maybe like a real example. I think we've done this before, but let's say that I want to spend $10,000 on a billboard campaign, and maybe let's just break it down into a couple like the component parts that someone might need to think about when planning a campaign like this. So I guess I'll rattle off a few, and then maybe we just kind of go back and forth on it, but clearly you've got to think about, location, so where the billboard's going to be. You need to think about, some of the different formats that those billboards are going to be in, how much creative you're going to be running, especially if they're digital. Are you going to kind of be updating that creative over the campaign's course, or is it going to be one piece of creative throughout the whole time? Those are some things I guess immediately think about. Also the measurement, like how are we going to measure it? And I think a lot of people will look at, looking at impressions to try to measure that based upon how many people are moving through a given area. But I'll stop myself there, not to steal all your thunder, but what are some like things that like just kind of breaking down like the 1, 2, 3 kind of steps or more that we would want to think about when planning out a billboard campaign?
I think the initial point for sure is definitely looking at your goals, right? What is it that you want to achieve? That goes without saying. But once you nail that down, I think we need to remember that digital out of home or out of home in general will help you move the needle more at the top of funnel, right? It's more of a brand building, brand reminder message that could be also leading to take action, because it's definitely an action generator, especially combined with social. Actually, some great studies came out of in the past that out of home generates a lot of mobile activities or searches. For example, you'll see a peak in your paid search actually when you run out of home on a sizable minor. All this to say that the first thing I would look at is what is your geography that you want to target once you have established your goals. What is the audience you're going after? Let's say, to go back to your example earlier, Austin, Texas, you want to go Austin, Texas, specific neighborhoods that you want to focus on, probably, or not. It could be the entire city. And then you want to look at your audience. You can select your boards in 2 ways. The traditional way would be, okay, let's look at which boards would be interesting for my campaign. Let's say you promote running shoes. Well, I want to be in the right context, which is gyms. Want to be probably avoiding bars, unless sports bar could be interesting. You want to be in parks, proximity to parks, when people walk and run to parks. So you want to think of that side of things. But what's interesting in a DSP, like with Broadsign ads, for example, you can tap into over 180 audience segments. And how those audience segments work is simply that we look at all the boards that are represented in the platform that you can purchase, and we look at what are the over index of different types of individual walking by those boards, and it's refreshed on a regular basis. So let's say you want to target avid runners. We might have, I'm not sure actually if we do, but I think we do, runners, and it will automatically pre-select boards that are actually proven to show over-indexed of runners proximity from those boards.
Oh,
so you don't have to, think of, and then you can say, you know what, I'm not interested in the one in bars, and I want to deselect those. You can add some more, you can massage, but that gives you a good base for your initial selection of boards. And following that, you may want to add, because the way you plan your campaign or set up your campaign is similar to an online platform. So you would have like a line order for this, and another line order for, let's say you want a specific message when it rains. We have a trigger called the moment trigger. So the weather trigger, it's actually allowing you to switch on and off some creative based on the weather conditions.
Based on the
runs, you can want to say, well, looking for some sunshine moment, jump in our running shoe.
I like it.
So
I love it.
That's interesting to leverage. The more contextual, and I think that's the overlooked part of out of home. It's not going to perform the way it's not going to really help you if you don't pay enough attention on your creative. Creative is the fundamental of everything, because think of it, we have a lot of creative space here. It's not a banner ad, and it's huge. Let's leverage that canvas, right?
Yeah. Would you, I mean, like with location and stuff like that, I mean, obviously you've got to consider the amount of budget you have for the amount of locations you want to be at. So you might not be able to be in LA, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco all at the same time on that budget. It might make sense to actually localize your spend in one area, because then you'll be able to get that billboard to run longer, right? Assuming you're winning the auctions at whatever you're bidding on within that platform, right? So it probably makes sense for people with a lower budget when they're just getting into it to probably pick the area maybe where they have, even like I've heard some folks that will run campaigns where, say they've got I mean, New York's obviously huge, right? But say they have a lot of clients in New York. Well, clearly that might make sense to do, because not only are you building more brand awareness in and around that area, but you've also got clients that also use that product as well. So just by pure word of mouth, people hearing about it, using it, etc., more billboards, you're going to get more run for your money. Is that kind of the case, or would you think about it differently, where you'd kind of programmatically say, hey, I want to just have ads rotating across, say, 100 different billboards across all these different cities, and still find a way to do that at a reasonable budget?
If I would be running this type of campaign, like smaller budget, like I have the critical choice of spreading myself thin or really focusing, I would focus. I would try to own specific location, and probably play more on the message, localize it as much as possible. If you are in Brooklyn, New York, well, hey, Brooklyn, make it as customized to the point where you it's almost a conversation. That's how people like to be approached nowadays, and connect with your message at a different and add some interactivity to it. I think we mentioned QR code earlier. I think if you offer something of value or create some intrigue, right? Do some storytelling, allow the user to contribute. We are used to the TikTok and the Instagram. Users are contributing all the time to content. Well, might be interesting to mix both, bring the interaction. So potentially you have a consumer contributed, user contributed piece to your out of home, We've seen those running with one of our DSP partner of Reach, our SSP at Omni. They have like a great campaign they ran for Mother's Day, where you could actually upload a specific message to your mother at specific location,
that's cool.
and they facilitate that workflow with them, something that is feasible with Broadsign as well.
I think you hit it on the head. Like, I think it is all about focus. And especially, I think for the folks that are probably listening to this, it's probably going to be between like seed to Series B stage, more early stage types of startups. When you're not Salesforce and you're not Adobe and you don't have hundreds and millions of dollars to spend on ad campaigns, the only hope you have is to get really focused and really specific. And there's risks to that, of course, right? Because the more focused and specific you could get, you could completely whiff, right? Meaning you could miss the whole market. But if you've got enough data that says like, hey, I feel pretty confident about where this message is going to be delivered, who's going to be there to get it, et cetera, then you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck versus trying to spread it across every single region. The same thing goes for like LinkedIn, Facebook, or any digital channel for that matter, right? It's like, hey, I want to be advertising around the world, but I've got $10,000 to spend this month. Okay, well, that's great. But if we spread your budget across all those areas, that means we're not going to have as much money to pay for each click that's required to get to the website, meaning that you might not get enough people to the website to get really much, right? Versus we could cover up a country like North America or a specific state or city in the case of billboards, and then make sure we're focusing all our attention there. So I think it's a really good point that you said there.
The fact that if you are becoming really picky on the location and own that location for a longer period of time, you get in the frequency, you get in the in multiple touch points with your consumers. We all know it. They need to hear it and see it for multiple times before they take action.
Right.
That's one. And second, use it as another channel that will sit aside your social, your search, your CTV, or whatever other channels you're exploiting. Out of home, the way I explain it to people is your X factor, is the one that will amplify the other ones. We see Matrix moving up on search when people run out of home for the specific locations where the out of home has been run. Same thing for social, more contribution, more people looking for your company. Create some intrigue, and that's going to move the needle. Of course, if you are going back to your example, if you're Salesforce, you might not see anything moving up in the same fashion as if you because of your maturity and everything. But if you are Series B and C, like you mentioned, I think there's so many startups that are being under evaluating or underestimating the potential of digital out of home for them to move the needle.
Agreed. Well, I think there's also a cool use case too, and I'm getting a little bit off track here with my outline here, but I think there's a really cool use case where people will light up just one billboard, potentially in New York a lot of times, or in a given region, and they'll take a picture of it. Someone in person will look up and take a picture of the billboard, and they'll repost it on organic and say something about it. And it's very interesting. I see these posts quite a bit on, especially LinkedIn, but everyone will just go wild. Like, oh, this is so cool. Like, oh my God. Like look, it's their logo. Like they're up in that city. Oh, congrats, man. That's awesome. And there's this whole like excitement around billboards, I think, because it's just real. I mean, maybe you can't touch it. You'd have to scale a building or something, but seeing it in person, there's something about that I think generates a lot of excitement. So it made me think about, not only are you getting the impressions of people like going by the highway or passing by the bus stop or the park or whatever it may be, but you got to think about how you can even repurpose through just taking pictures of the billboard and repurposing that on organic to say, hey, look, like we're out there. And then all of a sudden everyone starts thinking, wow, shit. Like if these guys are spending money on billboards, like they must kind of know what they're doing, because there's that kind of assumption.
It used to be reserved to the big brands. Now it's definitely affordable for anyone to leverage, but there's still that sentiment of you made it, right? You are in the big leagues if you're on a billboard.
Exactly.
That's why you're seeing those congrats coming out of those social message, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, cool. Well, so to get back to it, so we obviously talked about, all right, so we said $10,000 budget. We want to focus, ideally picking one city maybe, and staying there for a long period of time. I didn't follow up with you, but how long would you run a campaign on average? I mean, clearly depends,
It
I
totally
guess, on a
depends,
budget. But if
absolutely.
you said,
But it
like,
all depends on your budget and the frequency and the reach you want to have. But the longer the better, obviously. If you are running something short term, you will cut on the potential for your campaign to create an impression, a lasting impression. I think it's repetition that will get you in the motion of moving on KPIs, on brand KPIs, and creating that ripple effect on other channels that we just spoke about. But don't squeeze everything into your online channels. I think it's easy to grab like a percentage of your spent on social and allocate it to out of home. You'll see both contributing to each other and have like a greater impact at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I think clearly longer is better, and the same thing's true with any digital channel, right? I mean, especially if I can repeat the same message in different ways. I mean, I think Clearbit, has done this well. I always use this example, but firmographic targeting for Facebook, right? Like that message they have used for months. In fact, I think they even just repeat the same creative. They don't even do a creative refresh. It's the same creative. And they just keep doing it. But I'll tell you what, it's in my head. Like I can't think of any other provider that does that but them. And I know there are others, but they're like the top one because I constantly see it, especially on Instagram all the time. And of course, they've got other stuff that they run, but I think that repetition's key because as you and I both know, frequency builds trust. So the more times I see your brand, especially billboards, right? Because then all of a sudden you get that excitement around, oh wow, like you guys are up there. I mean, they must be an established company. When maybe you still could have a small little budget, but you just focused it very specifically in a city. So I think that's what's really interesting about billboards. Yeah. Well, good stuff, man. I think the one other thing I wanted to, before we kind of jump off is if you had any kind of examples of, we talked a little bit about measurement, obviously, in terms of like impressions and analyzing that. Obviously, you could look at visits coming from certain geos or locations and things like that within Google Analytics. But would you say that's still the primary kind of metric that you would look at when measuring, all right, hey, we started running this billboard in July and we ended the campaign at the end of July. How do we go up to the CEO and say, hey, here's what happened? Like what is the way? And clearly nothing's perfect, right? I mean, to your point, you said top of funnel brand awareness. So we got to kind of not put on our attribution hats too hard here, but at some degree we do need to be able to say, hey, what was the success? We spent $10,000 in this month. What happened? Are we looking at like, what are those metrics that you'd want to look at and where would we get them from?
The first initial one that is obvious is impressions. So let's remember out of home is a one-to-many medium. It's not a one-to-one. It's not the addressability is definitely not the same as you would find online, although it's depreciating more and more with the elimination of third-party cookies now. But putting that aside, it's sold on impressions basis. It's not sold on number of plays or number of time your ads is going to run. It's sold on impressions, so it can be put side by side with your other channels. Let's say you run display or you run LinkedIn. You can say, you know what, I ran at 200,000 impressions on out of home. And now that's more, okay, this is how many people we have been exposed to or had the potential to see the ad. It's a potential to see or opportunity to see the ad. It doesn't guarantee they saw the ad. Similar to your impression online, right?
Sure.
They're
exactly.
The other thing too, that's the starting point. So you can start measuring, showcasing your CPM compared to what you get now. When it comes to going a little bit further down, you can, depending on what platform you use, let's say with Broadsign ads, we have partners that allow us to run on the fly a specific brand lift study that will give you exactly how much have we moved KPIs at the brand level on specific specific matrix such as considerations, intention to buy, and things like that. So we are fully equipped to run those, and I just finished one for a financial player here in Canada last week. We can see the matrix, and you may wonder, like, how is that done? Like, in a very simple manner, what we do is to determine the expose and the control group. We they are using the online channels to run a survey. It's an interactive survey on those specific questions that we want to measure, and it's being targeted. That survey is targeted to mobile device IDs that were at proximity from the boards that were part of the campaign. So potentially have been exposed to the campaign, individuals that were exposed to the campaign. And once they start answering the survey, they are being asked if they remember seeing the ad, to really attribute, okay, is this really an individual that not only was at proximity, but has been exposed, and they do remember seeing the ad. So from there, that's our exposed group. And we ask questions to that group compared to a control group with similar demographic in the similar region that were not exposed, and start showcasing if we move some matrix and KPIs around brands, and it does move the needle. It's quite interesting to see it.
Got it. So impressions, certainly I think we could look at visits, and then brand lift tests as well. So I think those would be the two biggest thing. Clearly, you could also, to an extent, look at, other lagging indicators. I mean, you could look at demo requests and other leads that potentially would come in. It's always hard in this area. I mean, you'd have to keep everything across all marketing channels relatively the same, right? And then the new element would be billboards running for a month, which is always hard when you've got a big marketing team and lots of different things happening. But you could still look at that and say, hey, look, when we ran this, we got a whole lot more people to the website. One, our website's, count is ticked up by 30%. That's good. Are all those people qualified? Maybe not. Maybe they're not perfectly fit, especially when you're talking about B2B SaaS. A lot of times the addressable markets aren't really, really wide, like the D2C space. And you like tennis shoes. I mean, tennis shoes, everyone needs shoes, right? But not everyone needs, like SOC 2 compliance software as an example. But I think that's where you get into focused on specific cities where there's density of the types of companies or people that you're looking to go after. And then you can still make a campaign really successful, obviously, even if your overall TAM or your ICP is a little bit more niche, right? And I think that's a really important thing for people to know is it's not just like billboards aren't just for D2C. It's not just a D2C thing with Coca-Cola and McDonald's and all the typical people that you see on billboards. There's still very much a play for very kind of specific targeted billboard ads. And then we can't forget too, the ability to like take a snapshot and then also share that out, and the kind of buzz and interest that kind of creates. Maybe no one really cares. It's just kind of like a cool thing and makes people feel like you're the real deal.
One thing I forgot to mention about measurement as well is if you incorporate like a specific URL or QR code, of course you get to measure that direct action being taken. You can look at your search,
right? Exactly, that's a good point.
Volume,
the QR code
for branded terms in that specific area. You can also, there's different other measurements, very sophisticated one that can look at if you have a sizable campaign. You can look at your footfall attribution. If you have a retail location, we can work with a partner of us that allow us to measure how much lift have we provided with the digital out of home from people who were exposed to footfall attribution, so foot traffic to your retail location. So the attribution is becoming more and more sophisticated thanks to programmatic digital out of home and the data ecosystem that does supply a great added value to any advertisers.
Cool. I love it. Well, anything that I haven't asked or that we haven't talked about you think would be good to mention just about billboard ads, or you think we covered pretty much all of it?
We I might be able to send you a link today we covered how to set up a campaign. For example, we did run a webinar recently that does speak exactly to it in a 30 minutes. How can you set up your campaign on Broadsign ads, like a best-in-class kind of execution.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll include the link if you want to share. But I think we always welcome anyone wanting to to know more. And if at the end of the day, it's just about consulting and making the case internally, because sometimes marketers do have to make the business case internally for digital out of home, since it's not necessarily one that comes to mind. We're more leaning towards pure digital and the open web in general. I think we have a ton of information to share that could help you build that case internally.
I love it. Well, good stuff. Well, I guess for all those who are listening, I think big thing is if you guys are interested in running a billboard campaign, you can go to broadsign.com, right? And then you can look for Broadsign ads and get into their platform there. And it's really easy to start using, and just pick some billboards out and pick a campaign. And then they've also got some great account managers as well that I've also talked to personally myself that'll help you figure out how to build out your campaign, what locations and formats, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So anyway, well, it was awesome having you, man. We'll have to do it again here soon. And until the next time.